following that was going to custom modeling. Like, say you don't want to just model cubes, so you want abstract shapes. You want to give them that has a complete shape that can have a whole bunch of vertices formed through a curve. Busy sort of modeling here. Next, modifiers. So modifiers are simply just a way to change the way your shape looks in the graph. Then move on to mapping images to shape, right? So this is really important. If you want to make something look realistic, say if you want to make it look like it's metal or wood, you can just put an image onto it. Or if you want to actually have a plot that you generated for your data, you want to actually map that onto a physical surface, right? So this is XY axis, you can put that on the surface, and you can have this sort of color plot on top of the surface. And so shadows, how to turn off on shadows, because sometimes shadows can get in the way for your fingers. Particle systems, we can talk about that if you like. So right now I'm just going to just how to change the look of particles and how the way they behave under different forces, under different. And talk about movies, right? We want to just actually animate anything that you create. And other cool stuff, if we have the time, then I'll just talk about whatever you guys want. So next we're going to essentially make something that looks like this. So using textures, you can make this into. Alright, so getting started, I'll just talk about the user interface. Okay, so the first thing for the user interface, you see that you have multiple panes, right? You have this one here, this one here. Everything with a pane sort of has this triangle sort of shape right here with these lines. So these are all just different windows that sit beside each other. And these actually can be, you can actually change the scoop which is like, right? Because sometimes this is either too big, too small, you want to open them up. So really you can just drag them around by clicking and dragging to change the way they look. Also, you can join them. So you can't exactly just delete them. What you can do is join them. So if you want to get rid of this, what you do is just right click on the center there, or actually this one here. You say join area, and whichever way you want to push the window in. So I move the mouse up, it will extend this pane all the way up to this one. So this is a way to eliminate certain panes that you really find annoying or you're interested in. So if I do this, all you see is this pane right here. And so if you want to make a pane, it's as easy as just sort of taking it from the top here, dragging the corner down, and you can create a pane. Then you can just keep creating. I want to get rid of this again, right click, join area, up there, you can try that. So it works with every pane on here, even this one here. So this one is actually a pane. You see that they all have icons here. So this one is a sort of object pane. This one here is properties, so I have different icons. There's also properties, it has an icon right there. You can change what pane you're actually looking at, look at here. You do all different types of panes you can use. So the ones that are most important are, say, properties, the graph editor, which I'll probably get into in a third session. The 3D view, which is what you're used to right here. So this just creates another 3D view. So if you want to actually take a look at it in a different angle, you just sort of make another 3D view, and you have one right here. And you can control it the exact same way as this. So they're completely equivalent, just different in different places. So you can use the mouse, and you can change the views of this one. I can rotate this one here, I can move the mouse here, I can rotate this one here. So really cool to set. So if you want to make sure something, check how something looks from a certain angle, you can just create 3D views like this. Also, so say if you want a 3D view, you can make another timeline. So the equivalent is this one down here. Timeline, clock. And you can place that wherever you like. The most common ones are 3D view preferences, which are not really that useful. The sort of properties is something that you can keep around. And the outliner right here is what we're used to before. It's just a different object. And I think I've covered this before, but just going over it, it's pretty important. You see these eyes and these camera sort of icons here. So clicking them on the cube will make the cube visible. So this eye, as if you can see it, it just toggles the visibility on the screen. And the camera will toggle the actual, if it renders or not, if it turns on. If I render this, you see the cube's gone, because I click the camera icon, so it disappears. Clicking back the camera icon, you can see the cube again. Right? So if you don't want things to appear, you can actually turn them off using this icon. Another way to actually, another part of the user interface is actually layers. So there's many different layers. That's what you're seeing here. And these are these 20 boxes here. This is layer 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, and so up. So if you click on the second one, your cube is gone, right? Because everything else is in the first layer. So you go back, you can see it's at 1. If you press the keys, like right above your keyboard, the numbers 1 to 0, that just switches between the different layers. You can see that you can switch in between all the different layers. And you can place things in different layers. So if you select this cube, you press M, you can move to a different layer. You don't exactly have to press M, but you can actually move it using object menu. Okay, move the layer right here. Right? So you can always use menus if you don't use shortcuts. The M, you press M, and you move to the layer, say this one, this one, this 2. So it shows in this layer. And it shows it's populated with this circle here. So if this layer is active, then it'll have this orange circle or the gray there. If I want to move back, we just move back to this layer. Okay, and as before, you can, right beside object mode, we have this circle here. So right here, object mode simply means you're dealing with objects as a whole and not actual aspects of each object, just selecting whole objects at a time. This represents I'm looking at the surface. So this cube is going to look exactly just like the surface of the cube. If I change this textured mode is wireframe, and it's pretty self-explanatory to change the wireframe if you don't want to worry about the surface. You want to see the actual vertices and edges behind it. And texture will simply add the lighting aspect to it. And also add textures to get it to it. So you can see that there's some shadows already. And if you change the textures, it's pretty beneficial because it shows you a pretty good image of what it would look like before it's rendered, or as it's rendered. So if you just do surface mode, it just doesn't really take into account the light, if you will find. Okay, so next we'll just get into making dealing with edges, faces, and vertices, and sort of changing the shape. So let's make start with this cube, and all this is done in edit mode. You can see if you click object mode here, you can switch to edit. The shortcut for that is tab, and it's something that you'll use pretty often if you're using this program a lot. So you can see that as soon as you switch to edit mode, it selects everything. So right now, these buttons here tell you what you're selecting. Right now, this is selected here, and this represents vertices. Right? This is 1 point corner. This one is selected to represent edges. This one represents faces. So it's just the different types of selection that you want to deal with. If you want to deal with selecting faces, then you choose the third one here. You see these faces are selected from all the actual vertices. So A, again, is a shortcut for selecting or deselecting all. So if you want to just select, so right now I'm in face select mode under edit. So if I just right click on this face is selected. If I switch to this edge mode, you can just select edge. And so that's useful, say, we want our cube, and let's change the shape to parallelogram. You can drag that side up, that edge up, and drag this edge up. I'm just pressing G and Z for translation of that. You can see that now you have parallelogram just by changing the position of the edges. And so all the different basic commands that you can use, such as rotation, translation and scaling also work under this episode. So if you want to scale a certain part of the shape, not the entire shape, you can just say, I want to scale this bottom face. You can say scale, or S for scale, and make this bottom face even larger. And the same goes for rotation, right? So if you want to select this edge, rotation will actually rotate this edge in the plane that you're looking at. You can get pretty abstract shapes with this. So one of the most important things also, just before I'll let you just experiment with this, is the extrude function, which is you press E and it simply just moves part of that shape and pushes it in one direction. So you're just sort of making an extension. You think about it as just adding on like different compartments to your actual shape. So if I take in face select mode here, if I select this face, I can press E, and when it's extrude along the y-axis, I can pull it out. And you can extrude along each of these faces in any direction. It will extrude.
You can extrude it only on the perpendicular direction, right?
You can do it in each direction, but you can press X, Y, or Z, and you can change it.
Okay.
And if you want to extrude it, I think in the general direction.
It does something.
Not exactly sure. I don't think you can do it with face, but you can do it with, say, each vertice can also be extruded.
Okay.
So if you want to make a new vertice, okay. So it's not very useful in this kind of shape, but you can move vertices. You can move edges. So if you want to make sort of extrude it this way. Yeah. So it's not perpendicular for me.
Yeah.
So in general, you have this abstract shape where you can simply create it with everything. And so much of the time you actually want shapes that aren't so rigid, you just actually have sharp corners and everything. So you can actually create a smoother surface feel. So if you select the whole thing with A, you can actually, what we're going to do is here. I'll show you one of the modifiers. So right here with the wrench, under the properties, we're going to object modifier. If you click this wrench, we're going to add the modifier called subdivision surface. So again, that's under this property pane, the object modifier, and we're going to press subdivision surface. So right away you can see that what it's doing is actually making subdividing the surface into different vertices and actually making a shape within this larger shape. And you can actually change the number of subdivisions here. So if you change this, it makes it smoother. So if you get to a view of 6 or higher, then it becomes something that's actually smooth. So if you render this, okay, so yeah, it's not as smooth here because I just changed the render subdivision. So the view just means how are you seeing it? So you're seeing this with sort of 6/4 of subdivision. So if you change the render up to that 6, you're going to actually be able to render something with a very smooth one. You press F12 to render, you see that you get a very smooth shape. You can get these arbitrary shaped balls. Okay, so I'll just let you experiment with that a bit, and you can just, if you have any questions, just ask. Okay, so next we're just going to focus on doing curves and sort of making arbitrary structures that we can control the vertices precisely. So if you just go to File, New, and just erase what you have, or you can save what you have already. You just go to Reload and start a file. You press Control N as well. Alright, so we're just going to delete this cube, so you can just press delete, or X will delete it. Okay. So we're going to add something. An add menu here, curve, and then go to Bezier. So again, add at the top, press file menu, close the mesh, or sorry, curve, and then okay, so this is just a curve between 2 points. So if I zoom in, this is what it looks like. The curve. And so this curve, also, again, it's just if you press tab, you get into edit mode. And so you'll see that all this is just two vertices. And these handles here, those will just control the angle at which they connect. So it just controls the curvature between each point. So, for example, if you just right-click on one of these bars, you can just control the curve. Where it's shaped. So again, right-click this bar. If you right-click in the center, it'll just change positions. But if you right-click on the edge, you can control the actual curve. Okay, so where this is useful is what we're going to do is just actually form a complete loop. So I'm going to take this shape I have here. So I'm going to, if I press tab to go back to object mode, switch back to object mode as well. I'm going to rotate this along the x-axis so it's flat. So it doesn't really matter. It's flat or not, but it's kind of more about this. So like that, reasonably flat. And so what you can do is 7 on the numpad will just orient you so you're looking directly downward. So you can just go to view and say from top if you want to just view this from the top. So back to edit mode, you can actually just control the position and the shape of your curve in this way. Is it too fast for everyone or just good? Okay, so just before I had some 3D shapes. This curve is boring. It's not going to come up as anything really special. So what we can do is make it a complete loop. So if you pull this pane open, we'll go to the special menu only for curves called Object Data. So between the wrench and the material menu. Under Object Data, you have an option of making 2D shape or 3D shape. So 3D shape, all it means is that it doesn't fill in the area between the points. 2D shape does. So it's important to actually scroll down under active spleen. Just click the U beside cyclic, and it will make this curve just completely. So if you click that, then you just get this single sort of curve that goes from the point to the point. And so obviously you're not going to begin make a very complicated structure with just 2 points. So you can actually, again, with E, extrude, and make much more points. So again, extruding, making more points. E, clicking, E, and then click, E, and then click. Have this sort of shape. If I press cyclic, it will complete this entire shape. And again, as I said before, if you change the shape from 3D to 2D, it fills this in. Like this. So you have some filled in sort of shape around the trigger. And you can control the position of each vertex, drag them to where you want, control the actual bar from each side to make it whatever shape you like. Bar and make it a little more rounded. Sometimes you see a sharp corner, it's just because it's flipped inside of it. So that's here, once you sort of really bad circle. So you can make any arbitrary shape. So this is not the only type of vertices you can use. So you can see that these vertices are pretty smart when they try to make it as nice of a curve as possible. But by clicking them and pressing D, you can change the type of vertices you're doing. So you can change it to free, where it will simply, it won't really fit this curve for the most next vertices. Vector will simply just make this angle this bar independent of this bar. So these two handles are going to be independent. You can get these very sharp sort of intersections. So if I want to make this one a vector, this point, so right now I can create a sharp cut for this. I control it, the different handles on these points. So this way you can create arbitrary shapes. And obviously this is 3D, so this is really boring as far as having to deal with 2D structures. So under shape on the right, you can go to fill and go to both. And so this will help us later on. We're just going to increase the bezel depth. So slowly making it more 3D. You can just set it to 0.1 and you start getting 3D structure. So it's just making a bevel around the character. You can see it does the first thing. And you can also change the extrude from 0.1 to make it extrude a little bit. You just change it. The bevel just changes the actual thickness of the bevel. If you set it to 0, you're just going to get flat.
How did you get it into a loop?
Into a loop? Okay, so right again, under the menu here for the object data of the curve, you scroll down, on an active screen, check this view.
I don't have an active screen.
Check the 2D. I think. You can edit mode? Yeah, it must be it. Yeah. So switch to edit mode. Okay, there we go.
Oh.
Yeah. That's good. And of course, you can just make this good, make this look really nice, right? Make sure you just change the material again under this menu here we talked about before. So you go to materials here, and you can change the color. So something's yellow, and transparency. Add a sort of mirror to it, and you can have a preview of how it's going to look like up here. And a high amount of reflections, regular reflections. So how our shape looks in the wall. Again, tab, going back to object mode, you can change the shape of the object or rotate the object. And render it again. So that way, in principle, you can create any sort of logo that looks 3D. You can create arbitrarily shaped flat. So anything that's flat that has some sort of shape to it. And you don't have to start with to bend it. Yeah. So you can do that. See how to bend it here. So there's multiple ways to do it. You can, if you're more advanced, you create a cylinder sort of a certain radius, and you map this entire shape onto the surface of that cylinder. So there's ways to do that.
But is it exists or not?
Sorry.
How about this one? Exists or not? It's not going to bend it. We gaan goede mode level.
Okay, so if you go back to the edit mode, so you can actually just create move these vertices in 3D space, right? So if I move this up, here. Okay, you do something with it. But yeah, you simply take this vertice and you just move these vertices up. And so I'll show you that you can actually create much more vertices just multiply these vertices and just control each of the vertices dependent exactly the way you want. If you want a perfect sort of tall shape, and that takes a little more. So, move it up. You see that this sort of but I think that, yeah, okay, so in 2D mode, I think that's why it's restricted to 2D. 3D mode will simply not fill it in between, but I think it will allow you to move around really. I think it is. I've really tried. So, I'll have to think about that, actually. I'm going to actually try to do that. But, so something else, I'll show you something else that's useful though. So, you look at it right now, yeah, some sort of arbitrary pressure. Just back to your well, if you look at the structure here, you see that it's not really perfect. You should get it for very sharp, right? If you can create something that's a little more smoothed out, you can actually change the resolution. You have fills that can go. Okay, yeah, there we go. And then fill. Increase the resolution. Will help out. And same thing here, decrease the resolution. Geometry. Create the various. Yeah, I'll have to think about how you sort of create these shapes. I think with that, it might be better to actually make a sort of arbitrary surface. To add menu. If you got add surface or a metaball, these are much more arbitrary surfaces. So you can start with this. All right, so dealing with these shapes is nice, but what if we want to cut into certain shapes, right? So say if you want to cut a semicircle into this shape. So what we're going to do is add a new cylinder. So I'll push the cylinder right so it can affect the shape. And scaling this with S. We have a cylinder. And then it's smooth here. So you see the cylinder is intersecting. So if you want to cut a hole into this shape, so it's all done with modifiers. So if you start with the Bezier curve, so if you select it with the right mouse button or select it up here, go to modifiers, which is the French, and you're going to go to Boolean. The Boolean just performs. You have to be this shape actually. So we'll have to switch to like an actual 3D mesh instead of just a series of curves. So if you just introduce another cube or any sort of shape, and just intersect it with the phone. Okay, let's wait for everybody to do that. And so if you click on the cube, and again go to modifiers and go to boolean, what this does is you can actually generate with simple functions the union of the intersection of both. If you want to join the shapes together, you just go union, I want to join this with this. It's going to make one shape that includes this box with this little. I'm going to call that one shape. If you want to actually cut through, you want to apply difference. So you apply difference with the cylinder. So you get to make sure you're selecting this cube, and you apply this boolean modifier with the operation of difference to the cylinder. If you press apply, you'll see that nothing happens. But really, you move the cylinder, there's actually a hole in it. You can see that what you're doing is just cutting through the wall. You can do this with any sort of machine.
For us, you can also eat that.
That one? You want to try this one?
Because at this side of the table, we are eating like this. You hear crunching all the time. So no problema.
Very cool. Another thing that you can do with this box is really useful to save time. That usually for editing some structures, you want them to be symmetric. So you don't want to do twice as amount of work as the x-axis on each side, or the y-axis. So if we go into edit mode, what we want to do is actually, we want to extrude this side of this cube this way. We want to do the same with this side. Obviously that was just, you can just scale it on the practice and you get the same thing. So, but if you want to get a little fancier, so we're going to make sure on the cube, so if I go to edit mode, if I want to, we have this funny shape up top here. So if I select this shape here, if I want to extrude here, it's just going to do this. But you can actually add the mirror modifier. And so it will do the same operation that you're about to do, all the extra set off. So if I do the same thing now, so if you have to apply, so if I do it now, then I'll start doing it again on the x-axis. While I'm here, I'm going to mirror it on the other side. So again, if I try to select this one here, and I want to move it up, and you're going to create a pretty ugly shape, but you can mirror it on both sides. And again, you can actually mirror it on all sides, and then do the same thing everywhere.
I can select the angle of the mirror. I mean, it will be on the x-axis. But with a certain angle with a y plane, for example?
Yes, you can do an angle if you have to use a mirror object, right? So you take a plane, and then use that angle of the plane to actually add the mirror.
Okay.
So if you generate a plane, you add, say, this little object here. If I just make it with any other object, then it's not going to use the mirror, but plane.
Okay, then. I have to set the plane first, and then I use that as a mirror.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just let you try that out. If you have any questions, let me know. Just a different objects. So this one's just a random fancy surface. It's just a column here. And so you can easily create a realistic roof floor using this texture. Leaves, fabric. This is brushed aluminum or carbon fiber. And we're going to show you how to map these on. You can use this with any images. It doesn't have to be a texture, just JPEG, PNG file.
All of these?
So does everybody have the
No, no.
pictures? First thing to get started here is we'll just create exactly this sort of situation minus the text, right? So this is the plane. We're going to position a cube, sphere, and a monkey called Suzanne here. And this is one of the shapes that you can find under the add surfaces option here. So if you go to add surface, it would just be called a nerve surface. So it's right here. I'm just going to delete this pad right now. So you add a plane, scale that, floor. Surface here. Monkey. You can smooth it out on the menu on the left. Go like it. And add a cone. And add this view called UV sphere. You won't see them, they'll probably just come around and add underneath. Wherever your cursor is. So just move them up in the field of view. Right now, if I render this. Same thing there. It doesn't matter where the position is, as long as you have different whole bunches of shapes. You can always position items using absolute coordinates. So if you, in this menu under location, you can actually set, if you have your object selected, you can select what the exact unit for the coordinates right allow these positions. So that way you don't have to drag things around. And if you want to see the exact position, you can set it. Set it to 1, it will shift it exactly to that location. Okay, so another thing why everything's so dark is that I don't have the lamp, so just make sure you have a point source. If I render this, I get these shapes. And if you press Shift D on the lamps, you'll get more of them. So, or add more lamps in order to get more lighting. Alright, so then it's brighter. Does everybody have their scene set up? Alright. Okay, so first thing was going to have the wooden floor. So we're going to just select this floor with the right mouse button. So it's selected. So it's all in object mode. Over here, where it has material, it's going to add new material. Press new. Move on to texture beside it, and just press new. So I have the new material, new texture. So again, what I did is just select the plane with the right mouse button, and then go to material, press new material, and then texture with the checkerboard, and press new texture. right now the default texture is cloud. So we're going to change this to an image or movie. Okay, so you can actually put movies on top of surfaces. So again, right here where it says type, for any texture, type in menu, type image or movie. So if you set to clouds initially, just set it to image or movie. You scroll down a little bit after you're done this, where it says image, you're just going to press open. And opening this image, you're going to actually find it. You just locate your image. So I'm going to choose wood and just press open image. So again, all I did was scroll down a little bit where it says image. Once I have the type set to image or movie, and what you're going to do is just press open and then find the location of that image. So right now it's set to wood, and it probably looks cool already, so you just go to the main view, press F12, and it'll render this wood up. And you can do the same for each other image. So it doesn't have to be a blank. Again, you can just select the monkey, do the exact same thing. New material, new texture, you change the type to image or movie, and you open this carbon fiber monkey, or right away the monkey turns like that. Yeah, so just you can actually set the texture to each of these, any of these objects, and after they won't exactly show up under these menus here, but they will show up once you render. So this is good if you want to render a computer screen, you want to render any color graph, color plot on top of the surface. And so it's all done using the same method. So another thing you can do is say, I had this wood surface, right? And if I rendered it, it just look like this, right? So this is pretty realistic and nice size. So if you want to change the scale, right? So imagine this was, say, a few meters in size. This is not realistic to have wood length this width. So you can actually change how many images are placed on the actual plane. So if you scroll down to image mapping, this X and Y tells you how many times the image is repeating on the X and Y axis. So 1, 1 represents just one image. Right? So we just set one of these wood images onto the entire plane. So you can scale the plane down and it will scale the image down. Or you can simply change this X, Y to 2 or 4 and it will put much more of these wood textures here. So if I change it to 4 on both, so a total of 16 and wood pictures and render it, and you get this sort of next scale. So you can change the scale of the images without actually changing the size.
Sorry, how did you attach the texture to the object?
No, you should just you can cut that close to the okay, so it's not on there. Here. Get the complete material. Again, that's the key, and then because you get to set the material first and then texture. Yeah. No problem. Okay, that's pretty much all there is to it. You can pretty much use any image you want, and that's how you create really professional looking images using just very nice looking textures that you can make yourself. All right, so I'll move on to something quick, talk about shadows just a little bit. So right now I have a bit of shadows, not really that obvious, I guess, because I have shapes everywhere on my plant, but sometimes you need to move down here. That's just one of those issues, but I'm just going to take off this wood floor here. So I'm going to leave this texture with this side. Alright, so I'm going to create some shadows, but so one of the things you can do is actually to avoid shadows. I'm just going to create some spots here. Okay, so if you make it plain with a cube. So when you first render this, you see the cube and you have the shadow, you get this shadow. So really you get no information going on there. So if you want to make something that doesn't have all these fancy shadows, it's actually pretty simple. So you just want to make sure the cube does not trace out a shadow. So if you go to cube and go to materials, set the cube for the materials, you can just scroll down to trace option, trace. So I'm checking this trace a little less to make sure that you don't have objects creating shadow. So no shadow. And also, what you can do is change if the plane actually receives a shadow or not. If you don't want an object to actually get shadows on it, you do this plane. I don't want this plane to get a shadow. So under materials, you have to create the material for this. You go down to shadows. Just take off this, so it won't receive any shadows. So if you take all these things off, you're not going to get a shadow. That's another way to do it. So I'm going to go into particles. If you want to talk about that, it's usually modeling, say, rain, snow, or in physics, you're talking about electrons, talking about photons, you're talking about water, bullets, anything like that for collisions. You want to model particles. They have accelerations, they have forces undergoing, and they have sizes, they have different textures. Sometimes there's just halos or wires or flying. Right? So creating particle systems is actually fairly easy. The simplest one is dealing with a plane. Well, you can do it with any shape. So really, particles have to start out from the shape. So all you do is apply particles to the shape, and they'll start emitting from the shape. So if you set it from a plane, it's going to either emit, you can control the emit from the vertices. There's only four. Just come out of here. These four. Off from the edges, it will just come out here. Along the line. Or along the entire wall. It will just be everywhere. So to create a simple particle system is pretty easy. If you just go to this menu on the far right, you can be on material all the way to physics. You just click that, and you just click particle system. Or particles. Oh, sorry, one before that is particles. Actually, the one that goes before it. Right here. You just press plus, and already it's done. And so particles are not exciting by themselves. They take time to emit, so we're obviously time dependent. So this is when the timeline actually comes into play. You'll notice that once you press plus for particles, and you'll see this red line here. What this represents is that's where particles are actually undergoing some sort of, they're moving, or that's when they're being emitted. So if you move this timeline, you'll see this as particles. And you can press play down here, and it will display the image. And so these particles are just randomly generated from this point. And they're following the gravity set at negative 9.81. And you can change the gravity. You can change the forces that they undergo. And so right now, we're just going to change the settings for this particle system. So does everybody have a particle system set up? animate them. Yeah. All right, so, and we'll just keep playing and moving, right? And really, they're stopping. You can see the particles just disappear after this point, and that's a setting point. That's the flight time. So 50 milliseconds or 50 frames actually. This is all measured in frames. So after 50 frames, they start to disappear. You see that? It'll take 50 frames for them to fall to 60 something. So you can change this. You can just change it to something ridiculous number, and they'll just keep falling forever. Maybe they start falling. And if you zoom out, they'll just fall for 1,000 frames, which is way beyond this, right? And control how far they're going. Another thing is control the number of particles. Right away, this is something that you don't want to set too high. I think with these types of particles, you can set maybe even 20,000. It's not a big deal. So you can just change the density of particles. So you can set really, really dense particles. And at any point in time, you can actually, if you pause it or control where these are, you can press F12 and render them, and they'll render the particles. So, this is a bit of, yeah, so right now the camera just came underneath. So you see the density of particles here. It's set up as halos right now, but it's extremely dense. And you can change this density to say something that's very low, and you'll have to actually reset the timeline in order to see. Yeah, so you'll see there's much fewer particles. If I render this, you see there's only a few in the other. And just like for objects, you can change the color, you can change anything about these particles. So, get under. Change the color of the plane and also change the color of the particles. So that's why these sort of particles and the where they're coming from are. So you can change the color, you can change the texture, but right now we'll just set up the halos, right? So we're not going to have any texture at all. So these are good for long sort of electrons, right? So very, very small particles. But let's say you wanted to model something actually happens with 5.